My name is Malia, and I'm 32 years old. The day I buried my husband Marcus should have been the saddest day of my life. Instead, it became the day I discovered just how little his family thought of me. As mourners filed out of the cemetery, my mother-in-law Patricia pulled me aside with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Now that the unpleasantness is over," she said, gesturing dismissively at Marcus's grave, "we need to discuss the estate. Marcus's father and I will be taking over the house, of course. You understand." I just stared at her, too shocked to respond. Behind her, Marcus's brother Devin was already on his phone, presumably calling a real estate agent. His sister Simone was discussing which of Marcus's belongings she wanted to claim. Not one of them had asked how I was doing. Not one had offered condolences that seemed genuine. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Marcus had made very specific arrangements. Arrangements that were about to change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever dealt with in-laws who treated you like an outsider in your own marriage. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this plays out. I met Marcus Anderson 5 years ago at a community tech workshop in Denver. I was teaching a class on digital marketing for small businesses, and he showed up looking completely lost with a notepad and about a dozen questions. Marcus was 35 then, a software developer who had just left a corporate job to start his own consulting firm. He was brilliant with code, but hopeless with marketing, which is exactly why he'd signed up for my class. "I can build anything," he told me after the session, "but I have no idea how to tell people about it." I laughed. That's what I'm here for. Our professional relationship quickly became personal. Marcus was different from anyone I'd dated before, thoughtful, genuinely kind, and refreshingly honest about his feelings. He didn't play games. When he said he'd call, he called. When he made plans, he kept them. After years of disappointing relationships, his consistency felt like a gift. We were married 18 months later in a simple ceremony at a botanical garden. It was intimate, personal, and everything we wanted. Everything, that is, except for his family's approval. The Anderson family came from old money, not the kind that made national headlines, but enough to make them feel entitled to opinions about everything. Marcus's father, Richard, had built a successful real estate development company. His mother, Patricia, spent her days on charity boards and country club committees. They lived in a sprawling estate in Cherry Hills Village, one of Denver's most exclusive neighborhoods. From the moment Marcus introduced me to them, I could feel their disapproval. It wasn't anything they said directly. The Andersons were far too refined for that. It was in the way Patricia's eyes traveled over my off-the-rack dress at our first dinner. The way Richard asked about my people, as if I were some foreign species requiring classification. The way Marcus's siblings, Devin and Simone, exchanged knowing glances when I mentioned my father worked in construction. "Your family is very entrepreneurial," Patricia said, her tone making it clear this was not a compliment. "How charming." Marcus noticed, of course. That night, as we drove back to his apartment, he was unusually quiet. "I'm sorry about them," he finally said. "They can be particular." "Particular is one word for it," I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "Judgmental might be another." He reached for my hand. "They'll come around. They just need time to get to know you." But they never did come around. Over the next 3 years of our courtship and 2 years of marriage, the Anderson family made it abundantly clear that I wasn't what they'd envisioned for their son. At our engagement party, Patricia spent the entire evening introducing me to guests as Marcus's friend. At the wedding, she wore black. Literally wore black to her own son's wedding. When we announced we were buying a house, Richard immediately offered to loan Marcus the down payment, making it painfully obvious the offer didn't extend to me. "It's family money," he explained, as if I weren't about to become family. "We like to keep it in the bloodline." Marcus politely declined. The worst part wasn't their obvious disdain for me, it was how they treated Marcus. Every decision he made that prioritized our marriage over their expectations was met with disappointment. When we chose to spend Thanksgiving with my family one year, Patricia didn't speak to him for 3 weeks. When Marcus declined to join his father's real estate company, Richard told him he was wasting his potential on a hobby business. "They act like you're their property," I told Marcus after a particularly brutal family dinner where Richard had spent 2 hours lecturing him about family legacy and duty. "They don't know any other way," Marcus said, his voice tired. "In their world, family means control. They think that's love. But it's not." "No," he agreed. "It's not." Despite their treatment, or perhaps because of it, Marcus remained close with his family. He called his mother weekly, attended family dinners monthly, and tried to bridge the gap between his old life and his new one. I respected his loyalty even as I struggled with being the perpetual outsider. What I didn't realize until much later was that Marcus saw everything. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every time his family made me feel less than. He was keeping track, planning, making sure that when it mattered most, I would be protected. Marcus's cancer diagnosis came on a Tuesday in March, delivered in a sterile doctor's office that smelled like antiseptic and defeat. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Inoperable. 6 to 12 months, maybe less. "That can't be right," Marcus said, his voice steady even as his hand trembled in mine. "I feel fine. I ran 5 miles this morning. But the scans didn't lie." The cancer had been growing silently, spreading to his liver and lymph nodes before causing any symptoms we couldn't explain away as stress or poor sleep. The doctor gave us information about treatment options, clinical trials, and support groups. Marcus nodded through it all, asking intelligent questions about prognosis and quality of life. Only I could see the slight tremor in his jaw, the way his free hand gripped the chair arm until his knuckles went white. In the parking lot afterward, he finally broke down. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Malia. We were supposed to have more time. We had been trying for a baby. We had plans to expand his business, to travel to Italy, to grow old together in the house we'd just finished renovating. All of it, gone in the span of a single doctor's appointment." When Marcus told his family, their reaction was complicated. Patricia immediately began researching experimental treatments and flying in specialists from around the country. Richard wrote checks to every cancer research facility within 100 miles. Devin and Simone organized a family meeting to discuss care coordination. It should have felt supportive. Instead, it felt like a hostile takeover. "We think Marcus should move back home," Patricia announced at Sunday dinner 2 weeks after the diagnosis. "I can provide around-the-clock care, and he'll be more comfortable in his childhood home." "He's comfortable in our home," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "With his wife. No offense, dear, but you work full-time. How exactly do you plan to care for him?" "I'll take family leave. We've already discussed it." Patricia's smile was pitying. "That's sweet, but this is bigger than what one person can handle. Marcus needs his family. I am his family." The room went silent. Richard cleared his throat. "Let's not be dramatic," he said. "Patricia is simply offering help. We all want what's best for Marcus." Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Malia and I will handle this together. In our home. I appreciate the offers, but I've made my decision." You could have cut the tension with a knife. Patricia's face flushed, and Devin muttered something under his breath about ungrateful that he probably thought I couldn't hear. From that point forward, the family dynamic shifted. They visited Marcus regularly, but their interactions with me became even more strained. They would ask him questions about his treatment and care as if I weren't in the room. They brought food and gifts for him, but never acknowledged me. When I tried to participate in conversations about his medical decisions, they would redirect to Marcus as if seeking his permission for me to speak. The most painful part was watching Marcus navigate this. He was dying, dealing with aggressive chemotherapy that left him weak and nauseated, and yet he still had to mediate between his family and his wife. "I'll talk to them," he'd say after each uncomfortable encounter. "You shouldn't have to," I'd reply. "You should be focusing on getting better, not managing their feelings about your marriage." But that was the thing about the Andersons. They demanded emotional labor even in the worst circumstances. Everything had to revolve around them. their feelings, their preferences, their vision of how things should be. About 3 months into Marcus's illness, he asked me to set up a meeting with his lawyer. "I need to get some things in order," he explained. "Update the will, make sure everything is clear." "Okay," I said, my heart breaking at the practical necessity of planning for his death. "Do you want me to come with you?" "Actually," he said carefully, "I'd like to handle this one alone. There are some family matters I need to address, and I think it'll be easier if I can speak frankly with Alan without worrying about upsetting you." It hurt being excluded, but I understood. Marcus was trying to protect me from something, though I didn't know what. What I didn't realize was that he was building a fortress around me, one his family wouldn't be able to breach. Marcus's condition deteriorated faster than any of us expected. By June, he was too weak to work. By July, he needed help with basic tasks. By August, hospice had become involved, and we'd converted our living room into a hospital room so he could be comfortable. Through it all, the Anderson family maintained their presence, sometimes helpful, often intrusive, always acting as if they had primary authority over his care. "We're moving him to a private hospice facility," Richard announced one afternoon, as if this were already decided. "I've made all the arrangements." "You absolutely are not," I said, my patience finally snapping. "Marcus wants to be home. With me." "This isn't about what you want," Devon interjected. "This is about what's best for our brother. I'm his wife." "You've been his wife for 2 years," Simone said dismissively. "We've been his family for 37. Marcus, despite his weakness, ended the argument with finality. "I'm staying home," he rasped. "This discussion is over." But they kept pushing, kept undermining, kept treating our home like a hostile territory they needed to reclaim. They would rearrange his medication schedule without consulting me. They would countermand instructions I'd received from hospice. Patricia once threw away an entire week's worth of meal prep I'd made because it wasn't suitable for someone in Marcus's condition. I bit my tongue through most of it because I didn't want to burden Marcus with more family drama. But he saw it anyway. "I'm sorry," he said one night, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry they treat you this way. I should have addressed it years ago." "You're addressing it now," I said, though I didn't understand what he meant. He managed a weak smile. "More than you know." In mid-September, Marcus called his family to the house for what he said was an important meeting. He was lucid that day, which had become increasingly rare. His siblings and parents gathered in our living room, perching uncomfortably on furniture they'd clearly always deemed beneath them. "I want to clear something up," Marcus began, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "When I die, and we all know that's coming soon, there seems to be some confusion about what happens next." "Marcus, we don't need to discuss this now," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Yes, we do." He looked at each of them in turn. "Malia is my wife and the executor of my estate. Every decision about my care, my assets, and my final arrangements goes through her. Not you, Mom. Not you, Dad. Her." The room went very quiet. "That's unusual," Richard finally said. "Typically, in our family, these matters are handled by me," Marcus interrupted. "They're handled by me, and I've chosen Malia. I need you all to respect that." "Of course we respect it," Patricia said, though her expression suggested otherwise. "We're simply concerned that Malia might find this responsibility overwhelming. Perhaps a co-executor arrangement would be more practical. The arrangement is final." What none of them said, but all of them clearly thought, was that they expected to override whatever decisions Marcus had made. They believed that once he was gone, they could simply push past me and take control. After all, I was just the wife, the temporary interloper in the Anderson family dynasty. They had no idea what Marcus had actually put in place. Marcus died on October 3rd, peacefully in his sleep with me holding his hand. After months of pain and struggle, his passing felt like a terrible relief for him, at least. For me, it was the beginning of a new nightmare. The Anderson family immediately took over funeral arrangements, brushing aside my input as if I were simply another mourner rather than his widow. Patricia chose the casket, Richard arranged the service, and Simone wrote the obituary, all without consulting me. When I protested, Patricia simply said, "Dear, you're in shock. Let us handle the details." The funeral was held at an Episcopal church the Andersons had attended for generations. The service was formal, elegant, and felt nothing like Marcus. The minister had never met him but spoken platitudes about service and duty that would have made Marcus laugh. His colleagues from work weren't invited. His college friends were relegated to the back rows. Instead, the front pews were filled with Anderson family friends and business associates who probably couldn't pick Marcus out of a lineup. I sat in the front row, numb and disconnected, while Patricia openly wept beside me, the grieving mother performing her sorrow for an audience that lapped it up. Devin gave a eulogy that focused more on the Anderson family legacy than on Marcus himself. No one asked if I wanted to speak. After the burial, Patricia hosted a reception at her estate. I wasn't consulted about this either. It's tradition, she explained when I questioned it. Anderson funerals are always held at the family home. At the reception, I was treated like a distant relative rather than the widow. People offered me polite condolences before quickly moving on to discuss real estate prices and stock portfolios. Several people asked if I knew what I was going to do now, as if Marcus's death were simply a change in my employment status. That's when Patricia pulled me aside. "Now that the unpleasantness is over," she said, gesturing back toward the cemetery, "we need to discuss the estate. Marcus's father and I will be taking over the house, of course. You understand." I was too stunned to respond immediately. The house, our house, that Marcus and I had chosen together, renovated together, filled with our memories. She was claiming it like it was a family heirloom being returned to its rightful owners. "The house is mine," I finally managed. Patricia's smile was condescending. "Well, technically, it's part of Marcus's estate, which will need to be settled. Given the complexities, Richard and I think it's best if we oversee the process. We'll make sure you're taken care of course. A modest settlement, perhaps a small condo. I'm the executor of Marcus's estate." "Yes, dear, Marcus mentioned something about that. But executor is really just a formality. The family will handle the actual decisions." "That's not how executorship works." "Malia," she said, her voice hardening slightly, "let's not make this difficult. You were a wonderful companion to Marcus during his final months, and we appreciate that. But this is Anderson family business now. You're a sweet girl, but you're not equipped to handle complex financial matters." Behind her, I could see Devin on his phone, presumably already contacting real estate agents. Simone was photographing various pieces of furniture in our home, furniture Marcus and I had purchased together. They'd already divided up our life. They were just waiting for me to get out of the way. "I need to go," I said, extracting myself from Patricia's grasp. "We'll be in touch," she called after me. "Let's plan to meet next week to begin the transfer process." I drove home in a daze, barely remembering the route. Inside our house, my house, I collapsed on the couch that Marcus had insisted we buy because it was perfectly designed for napping. That's when I finally let myself cry. Not the polite, quiet tears I'd allowed at the funeral, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from the core of my being. I cried for Marcus, for our lost future, for the loneliness that stretched ahead of me. But I also cried from anger. Anger at his family for treating me like an inconvenience, for diminishing my grief, for already trying to erase me from Marcus's life. After the tears subsided, I went to Marcus's home office and pulled out the folder he'd prepared for me. Inside was his will, various legal documents, and a letter addressed to me in his familiar handwriting. "My dearest Malia," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I had to leave you. But I need you to know that you are protected. My family will try to override my wishes, to push you aside as they've always done. Don't let them. Everything I've built, everything I have is yours. You were the only person who ever loved me for who I was, not for what I could provide or what family name I carried. The documents in this folder are your shield. Use them. Don't let them bully you. Don't let them make you feel small. You are my wife, my partner, and my choice. Always. I love you more than I ever managed to say. Marcus." I held the letter to my chest, fresh tears streaming down my face. Then I opened the will and began to read. What I found there made me sit back in shock. Marcus hadn't just made me executor, he'd built an entire legal fortress. The formal reading of Marcus's will took place 1 week after the funeral at the office of his attorney, Alan Brenner. The entire Anderson family showed up looking somber but confident. They clearly expected this to be a formality. A legal confirmation of what they already assumed would happen. Patricia wore black Chanel. Richard had his briefcase, presumably filled with documents he planned to have me sign. Devin kept checking his watch as if this were just another tedious business meeting. Simone was on her phone, texting someone about meeting for lunch afterward. I sat quietly in the corner, dressed simply in a gray dress, holding the folder Marcus had left for me. Alan entered the conference room with his assistant, both carrying thick document folders. He was a distinguished man in his 60s who had known Marcus since childhood, but had always been kind to me, one of the few people in Marcus's orbit who treated me with genuine respect. Thank you all for coming, Alan began. I know this is difficult, so I'll try to make it as straightforward as possible. Marcus was very specific about his wishes. Of course, Richard said magnanimously. We're here to support whatever arrangements Marcus made. Though I think we all understand that some modifications will be necessary given the circumstances. What circumstances? Alan asked mildly. Well, Patricia interjected, Marcus was ill when he made these arrangements. Under duress. And certainly, he wouldn't have wanted to burden Malia with complex financial decisions. Marcus's mental capacity was thoroughly documented at the time he revised his will, Alan said, his voice cooling slightly. He was completely lucid and acting of his own free will. There will be no modifications. The Andersons exchanged glances, but Alan continued before they could protest. Let me begin with the primary bequests. To his wife, Malia Anderson, Marcus leaves the entirety of his estate, including but not limited to the house at 4782 Maple Street, all financial accounts, his business, Anderson Tech Solutions, all personal property, vehicles, and investments. The room went dead silent. I'm sorry, Devin said, leaning forward. The entirety? Yes. That can't be right, Simone said. What about family provisions? What about us? Alan consulted his notes. To his mother, Patricia Anderson, Marcus leaves his collection of first edition books with a note that says, "These are the only things I owned that you ever showed genuine interest in." Patricia's face flushed. To his father, Richard Anderson, Marcus leaves his Harvard Business School diploma with a note that says, "Since you valued this more than anything I actually accomplished." Richard's jaw clenched. To his brother, Devin Anderson, Marcus leaves his investment portfolio documentation with a note that says, "Study these. Maybe you'll finally understand why I didn't join the family business." Devin stood up. This is bullshit. He can't. Sit down, Mr. Anderson, Alan said firmly. I'm not finished. To his sister, Simone Anderson, Marcus leaves a check for $10,000 with a note that says, "Enough for one more vacation you didn't earn." Simone gasped, tears springing to her eyes. Though whether from grief or rage, I couldn't tell. This is outrageous, Patricia said, her voice shaking. Marcus would never deliberately hurt his family like this. Malia must have influenced him, manipulated him when he was vulnerable. I have extensive documentation proving otherwise, Alan said calmly, including video recordings of Marcus explaining his reasoning, made in the presence of myself and 2 other attorneys. Would you like to view them? Yes, Richard snapped. I absolutely would. Alan nodded to his assistant, who set up a laptop and projector. The lights dimmed, and suddenly Marcus's face appeared on the screen. He looked thin and tired, but completely aware, sitting in what I recognized as Alan's office. This recording is being made on August 15th. Marcus's voice came through the speakers, approximately 6 weeks before my anticipated death. I am of sound mind, as certified by Dr. Jennifer Walsh, my oncologist, who is present here today. I want to be absolutely clear about my intentions regarding my will and estate. He paused, taking a sip of water. To my family, Mom, Dad, Devin, Simone, I know you'll be shocked by my decisions. You probably think I was coerced or manipulated. You're wrong. I made these choices deliberately and with full awareness of their impact. On screen, Marcus shifted in his chair, wincing slightly from pain. For my entire life, you treated my wife like an outsider. You dismissed her accomplishments, belittled her background, and made it clear she would never be good enough for the Anderson family. You wore black to our wedding, Mom. Black. You offered to loan me money for our house, but specified it couldn't go to her, Dad. You spent years trying to pull me away from the one person who loved me unconditionally. I could hear Patricia's sharp intake of breath beside me. Malia never asked me for anything, Marcus continued. She worked full-time while putting herself through business school. She built a successful career independently. She supported my dreams when you called them hobbies. When I was diagnosed, she took family leave to care for me, while you tried to remove me from our home. Marcus's eyes, even on video, were intense. So yes, I'm leaving everything to my wife. Not because she manipulated me, but because she earned it. She earned it by being my partner, my equal, my choice. You spent decades treating her like a temporary inconvenience. Now you'll understand just how permanent she is. The video continued for several more minutes, with Marcus methodically explaining each decision and provision. By the end, the Anderson family sat in stunned silence. When the lights came back on, Patricia was crying real tears this time, not performative ones. Richard's face was stone. Devin looked like he wanted to flip the table. Simone just stared at the blank screen in disbelief. This isn't over, Richard finally said, standing. We'll contest this. We'll fight it. That's your right, Alan said calmly. But I should inform you of one final provision in Marcus's will. What provision? In the event that his family contests the will or takes any legal action against Malia Anderson, they forfeit even the small bequests they were given. Additionally, Marcus has left detailed documentation of every instance of their mistreatment of Malia, including recordings, emails, and witness statements. Should they pursue legal action, all of this becomes part of the public record. You can't do that, Devin said. Marcus did it, Alan corrected. He was remarkably thorough. I finally spoke for the first time since entering the room. I don't want to fight with any of you. Marcus didn't want that either. He just wanted you to finally respect his choices and respect me. Respect you. Patricia's voice was venomous now, all pretense of civility gone. You're a gold digger who wormed her way into my son's life and manipulated him into cutting out his family. No, I said quietly but firmly. I'm the woman your son loved. The woman who stood by him when he chose to leave your company and start his own. The woman who cared for him every single day of his illness. The woman he trusted enough to make his final decisions. I stood, gathering my folder. You can contest the will if you want. But you'll lose, not just the case, but any remaining dignity you have when the public learns how you treated your dying son's wife. Marcus gave you a choice. Honor his wishes, or expose yourselves as exactly what he described in his documentation. I walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I wish things had been different. I wish you'd given me a chance. I wish Marcus hadn't had to protect me from his own family. But he did, and now we all have to live with the consequences of your choices. As I left Alan's office, I could hear shouting beginning behind me. The Anderson family was fragmenting, turning on each other as they processed what had happened. For the first time since Marcus's death, I felt something other than grief, a fierce pride in my husband for standing up for me, even beyond death. The next few months were complicated. As I'd predicted, the Andersons initially tried to contest the will. They hired expensive lawyers, filed petitions, and made accusations of undue influence. But Marcus's documentation was too thorough. He'd included medical records proving his mental competency, video testimony from multiple occasions, and even statements from neutral third parties who had witnessed his family's treatment of me. The case was dismissed within 6 weeks. With that avenue closed, the Andersons tried a different approach, social warfare. Patricia began telling anyone who would listen that I had isolated Marcus from his family during his illness. Richard spread rumors about my financial management skills, suggesting I would squander Marcus's legacy. Devin posted vague but pointed comments on social media about family betrayal. It hurt, but I had something they didn't, the truth and the receipts to prove it. Alan connected me with a publicist who specialized in reputation management. Together, we crafted a careful response, not defensive or attacking, just factual. We released a statement explaining that I was respecting Marcus's wishes and that all legal challenges had been dismissed. We included a quote from Marcus's video testimony about his love for me and his reasons for his estate decisions. The public response surprised me. Instead of vilifying me, people began questioning the Anderson family. Why had they been so shocked by their son leaving his estate to his wife? Why were they fighting his clearly stated wishes? What had their relationship with Marcus actually been like? Within a month, it was the Andersons facing social consequences, not me. Patricia quietly stepped down from several charity boards. Richard's business reputation took a hit when people realized he'd tried to override his dead son's will. Devin lost a major client who found his behavior distasteful. Simone, perhaps wisely, withdrew from the public eye entirely. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I mostly felt sad that it had come to this, sad that Marcus's family had learned nothing, sad that they were more concerned with their reputation than with honoring their son's memory. But life moved forward. I threw myself into running Anderson Tech Solutions, Marcus's consulting firm. He'd built something impressive, and I was determined to maintain his legacy properly. With my marketing background and his technical foundation, the business actually grew. Within a year, we doubled our client roster and hired 3 new developers. I also found unexpected support from people I'd barely known during Marcus's life. His college friends reached out, sharing stories about Marcus that his family had never told me. His former colleagues became regular contacts, offering business advice and personal encouragement. Even some of the hospice workers who'd cared for Marcus checked in periodically to see how I was managing. One afternoon about 8 months after Marcus's death, I received a call from an unknown number. "Malia? This is Catherine Anderson." I recognized the name Marcus's aunt, Richard's sister, who I'd met exactly twice at family gatherings. "Hello, Catherine. I hope it's all right that I'm calling. I got your number from Alan Brenner. I wanted to apologize." I wasn't sure what to say to that. "I should have done this months ago," she continued. "I should have done it years ago, honestly. The way my family treated you is inexcusable. I saw it happening, and I said nothing because it was easier to go along with Patricia and Richard than to rock the boat." Thank you for saying that. Marcus was my nephew, and I loved him. But I can also admit that my family has a tendency to be controlling, elitist. We convince ourselves that our money and status give us the right to dictate other people's lives. Marcus was the first one brave enough to really break free from that. We talked for over an hour. Catherine shared stories about Marcus as a child, about his fierce independence even then, about how my marriage had actually made him happier than she'd ever seen him. She didn't try to excuse her family's behavior, but she helped me understand the twisted logic behind it. They genuinely believed they were protecting him, she explained. From what? I'm not sure. From being happy? From choosing his own path? But in their minds, they were the ones who knew best. And now? Now they're realizing that their arrogance cost them their son. Not physically, the cancer did that. But emotionally. Marcus distanced himself from them long before he got sick because they couldn't accept you, couldn't accept his choices. They're finally understanding what they lost. Is that why none of them have reached out? Partly. Also pride. Admitting they were wrong would mean acknowledging years of mistakes. That's difficult for people like my brother and Patricia. After we hung up, I sat with Catherine's words for a long time. I wanted to hate the Andersons for what they'd put me through, for how they'd treated Marcus. But mostly I just felt sorry for them. They'd lost their son, and instead of cherishing the time they'd had with him, they were stuck in bitterness about how things had ended. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was the Anderson estate. Inside was a handwritten note from Patricia. "Dear Malia," it began, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I even deserve the courtesy of a response. But I need you to know that I regret my behavior. not because of the will or the money. Losing that was just consequence. I regret that I never got to truly know the woman my son loved. I regret that I let prejudice and pride keep me from welcoming you into our family. I regret that Marcus felt he had to protect you from us. Most of all, I regret that I wasted the precious time we had with him fighting battles that never mattered. You were right at the will reading. Marcus gave me a choice, and I chose Pearly. For years, I chose Pearly. I chose status over substance, appearances over authenticity, control over connection. And now he's gone, and I can't take any of it back. I don't know if we can ever have any kind of relationship. I wouldn't blame you for wanting nothing to do with me. But if you're ever willing, I would like to try. Not to reclaim anything or insert myself into your life, but simply to understand the woman who made my son so happy. With regret and respect, Patricia. I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda. But it seemed genuine, raw, and painful in its honesty. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process whether I even wanted a relationship with Marcus's family. But I kept the letter tucked into the folder with Marcus's final documents. Maybe someday. 2 years have passed since Marcus died. 2 years since his funeral, since the will reading, since his family learned that their prejudice and pride had cost them everything. I still live in our house, though I've made some changes. The living room is no longer a makeshift hospital room. It's back to being the cozy space where Marcus and I used to watch movies and argue about which streaming service had the best content. I've kept his office exactly as it was, though. Sometimes I sit in there when I need to feel close to him, surrounded by his books and the whiteboard, still covered with his last project ideas. Anderson Tech Solutions is thriving. We've expanded to 12 employees and just landed our biggest contract yet, ironically, with a company that had previously worked with Richard's firm but switched to us after seeing our work. I like to think Marcus would be proud, not of the success necessarily, but of the fact that I built something sustainable from what he started. I've also started a foundation in Marcus's name, providing scholarships for first-generation college students pursuing careers in technology. It's funded entirely by the estate he left me, money the Andersons assumed would eventually return to them. Instead, it's helping kids who remind me of myself, young people who don't come from money or connections, but have talent and drive. The first time I met our scholarship recipients, a young woman named Jasmine approached me after the ceremony. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes. "This scholarship means I don't have to work 3 jobs while trying to study. It means I can actually focus on learning." Marcus would have loved that, I told her. He believed talent mattered more than pedigree. Did his family believe that too? I smiled sadly. They're learning too. Because here's what happened, slowly, tentatively, the Andersons and I have begun rebuilding something. Not the relationship we should have had, but something honest. Patricia and I meet for coffee once a month now. The first few meetings were awkward, filled with long silences and careful words. But gradually, we've found our way to real conversations. She tells me stories about Marcus as a child, his stubborn independence, his fierce sense of justice, his tendency to root for the underdog. I share memories from our marriage that she never got to witness. He told me once, I said during one of our recent meetings, that he felt like he spent his whole childhood trying to be the son you wanted, and his whole adulthood trying to find himself again. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. I know. I saw him pull away, and I thought he was rejecting us. I never understood that we were the ones rejecting who he really was. He never stopped loving you, I assured her. Even when he was angry, even when he was hurt, he never stopped wanting your approval. But he stopped needing it, she said quietly. And that's what terrified me. I raised him to be dependent on our validation, and then when he found it elsewhere, when he found it in you, I felt like I was losing him. These conversations don't erase the past. They don't undo the years of dismissal and judgment. But there's something, a tentative bridge built on honesty instead of pretense. Richard is harder. He's reached out a few times, always with a formal tone, always carefully worded. We've had dinner twice, both times at neutral locations, both times with conversations that stayed safely in shallow waters. I can tell he's trying, but decades of emotional unavailability don't dissolve overnight. Devin apologized via email 6 months ago. It was brief, almost businesslike, but sincere enough. We're not friends, probably never will be, but we can be civil at family gatherings when I choose to attend them. Simone surprised me the most. She showed up at my house one Saturday morning, unannounced, holding a plant and looking terrified. "I don't know if you remember," she said when I opened the door, "but Marcus loved this kind of succulent. He had 3 of them in his apartment before you two moved in together. I thought maybe you'd want one." I invited her in. We talked for 3 hours, and for the first time, I saw past the privileged princess facade to the insecure woman underneath. Simone had spent her whole life competing with Marcus for her parents' attention, never realizing that the competition was rigged. Their parents had already decided Marcus was the important one, the heir, the one who mattered. Everything Simone did was dismissed as frivolous because she was the daughter, the spare, the one who would eventually marry well and cease to be the parents' responsibility. "I was jealous of you," she admitted. "You had something with Marcus that was real. Equal." My parents pushed me toward men who came from the right families, had the right credentials. None of them actually knew me. I'm 34 and I've never had what you and Marcus had. "It's not too late," I told her. "You can choose differently." She smiled sadly. "That's what Marcus kept telling me." I wish I'd listened. Now Simone and I text regularly. Nothing deep, just casual check-ins and occasional coffee dates. She's dating someone new, a teacher she met at a FR Yen's party, someone her parents would definitely not approve of. She seems happier than I've ever seen her. The whole experience taught me something important about family. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and marriage certificates don't automatically create connection. Real family is built through consistent actions, through showing up, through choosing someone over and over again, even when it's inconvenient. Marcus chose me every single day of our marriage. In small ways. Defending me in conversations with his family, prioritizing our plans over theirs, making sure I felt heard and valued. And in the big way, the final way, protecting me even after he was gone. His family had to lose everything to understand what they'd had. They had to face the public consequences of their private cruelty. They had to sit in the discomfort of knowing their son trusted his wife more than he trusted them. Some people might say Marcus's will was vindictive. That he should have been more forgiving, more understanding of his family's flaws. But I disagree. Marcus's will was an act of love for me, yes, but also love for his family. He gave them something they desperately needed but would never have accepted otherwise, a way-up call. Sometimes people need to lose something to understand its value. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is enforce consequences instead of enabling bad behavior. Marcus understood that in a way his family never had. I visit Marcus's grave every week. It's a simple headstone in a cemetery nowhere near the Anderson family plot, another choice Marcus made deliberately. He wanted to be buried somewhere we'd chosen together, not in a family mausoleum that represented everything he'd spent his life trying to escape. "I think they're starting to get it," I told him during my last visit, sitting cross-legged on the grass beside his grave. "Your mom actually asked about my family last week, asked, not dismissed." It's progress. The wind rustled through the trees overhead, and I imagined it was Marcus laughing. "The business is doing well. You'd be proud of the team we've built. Everyone there actually cares about the work, not just the prestige. Just like you wanted." I traced my fingers over his name on the headstone. "I miss you every single day. Not a moment goes by when I don't wish you were here. But I'm okay, Marcus. I'm building a life you'd be proud of. I'm not letting them make me small. I'm not letting anyone make me small." A woman walking her dog passed by, giving me a sympathetic smile. How many times had she seen me here, talking to stone and grass like they could answer back? But in a way, Marcus does answer. Every time I stand up for myself, every time I refuse to accept less than I deserve, every time I choose authenticity over approval, that's Marcus speaking through me. He spent 5 years showing me what real love looks like. Now I get to spend the rest of my life honoring that lesson. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel like an outsider by your partner's family, please know you're not alone. You're not imagining the slights, the dismissals, the subtle ways they try to make you feel less than. Trust your instincts. Trust your worth. And if you're someone who has treated your child's spouse poorly, thinking you were protecting your family or maintaining standards, please understand that you're not protecting anyone. You're creating distance. You're forcing your child to choose between you and their partner. And when you do that, you might not like which choice they make. Marcus's will wasn't about money or revenge. It was about respect. Respect for his choices. Respect for our marriage. Respect for me as a person rather than an inconvenience. His family had years to offer that respect freely. Instead, they had to learn its value by losing everything. The Andersons are rebuilding now, slowly learning to be the family Marcus always needed them to be. It's not perfect. It's not simple. But it's honest, which is more than we ever had before. I've learned that real love, the kind worth fighting for, doesn't ask you to make yourself smaller. It doesn't require you to prove your worth over and over again. Real love sees you, values you, protects you. Marcus gave me that kind of love, and he made sure it would continue protecting me even after he was gone. To anyone dealing with difficult in-laws, set boundaries. Demand respect. Don't accept crumbs and call it a feast. Your partner should be your advocate, not your mediator. If they can't stand up for you to their family, that's a problem that won't magically resolve after marriage. To anyone planning their estate, be specific. Document everything. Make your wishes clear and legally binding. Don't assume your family will do the right thing or know what you wanted. People will fill in the blanks with their own desires if you don't explicitly state yours. And to anyone who has lost someone they love, grief is not linear, healing is not quick, and it's okay to feel multiple things at once. I can miss Marcus desperately while also being grateful for the time we had. I can be angry at his family while also working toward reconciliation. I can honor his memory while also building my own future. Marcus used to say that we teach people how to treat us. His family spent years teaching him that his choices didn't matter, that his wife didn't matter, that their approval was the only thing worth having. So he taught them a final lesson, one they'll never forget. Your worth is not determined by other people's ability to recognize it. Your choices matter. Your voice matters. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is protect yourself, even if that means disappointing people who were never going to approve of you anyway. Have you ever dealt with in-laws who refused to accept you? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who might need to hear this message. Remember that you deserve to be valued, respected, and chosen. Not just in words, but in actions. Marcus taught me that. It's a lesson I'll carry for the rest of my life. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you navigate your own family dynamics with courage, clarity, and an understanding that sometimes enforcing boundaries is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others. And wherever you are, Marcus, thank you for choosing me. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like. I promise to honor that gift every single day.